Catalyst 8000 Vs, the new virtual router from Cisco that is SD-WAN compliant. If you're curious about how to set these devices up, stick around. I'm going to show you how. All right, to pick up where we left off, what we have in our environment is our Catalyst 8000V router. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to SSH over to that router, and I want to make certain that everything is ready for it to be onboarded into the SD-WAN fabric. So to do that, I'm actually going to say SSH to admin at 100.100.101.212, log in using the credentials of admin, password admin, and we can see I'm sitting on the box. Now, if we take a look at this and I say show IP, interface brief, exclude assigned addresses, what we're going to see here is that it received its IP address via DHCP. I want to check some reachability information. Can I ping out of the infrastructure? I can. Can I ping, say, for instance, www.google.com? I can. And when I take a look at the reachability, can I reach my vManage? So I'm going to ping vManage 1 in the cluster. Can I ping vManage 2 and vManage 3? I can. Obviously, I want to know if I can reach the vBond. And I need to be able to at least reach one vSmart. And we can see that we have all the reachability that we need in the infrastructure. Now, what I want to do is I want to execute a show run interface gigabit Ethernet 1, and I want to take a look at gigabit Ethernet 2. Now, these are the two main interfaces that we're going to be configuring, but what I want to do is I want to use the template that we built in the previous section to actually do this implementation. So very quickly, let's take a look at what we have in the overall topology. Right now, we're sitting here on this device right here. I have the Docker container that's connected to it. And what I want to do is I just want to verify a few things. So first and foremost, I'm going to open the Docker container. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to do a browse. So I'm going to open up Firefox. While I'm waiting for that, I'm going to go ahead and open up a terminal. And from this perspective, I want to know, can I ping 8.8.8? And we can see that I cannot. And can I ping www.google.com? Let's see if we have DNS resolution. And we can see that we cannot. And if I take a look at the browser window, what we see here is I cannot go to something like www.enter1.com. So what we want to do now is we want to go through the process of onboarding this Cat 8000V. Now, in order to be able to do that, there's going to be some things that I'm going to want to do. I want to leverage that template that we built. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in and I'm going to take a look at that Cat 8000V-R1 template that we implemented. And what I want to do is I'm going to attach a device to it. Now, you'll see that the only thing that I can attach based on the type of device template that I've built is going to be one of our Cat resources. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the very first one in the list. It will end in 063 Bravo. I'm going to go ahead and move this over, and I'm just going to go through the motions of doing the attachment. Now, that means I need to provide pieces of information that may be missing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to assign it a system IP address using the 172.255.5 sequence, and this is going to be 179. The next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to assign it a site ID. We'll just go ahead and use site ID 1003. And what I want to do is I want to give it a name, and that name is going to be a CAT8K-R1. Now, that's a different name than the device currently has right now. So just to drive that point home, it is currently called a C8KV-1. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to hit Update. I'm going to go ahead and hit Next, and I'll just go ahead and configure devices. And what we should find is this should go through the motions of trying to actually attach the Catalyst 8000V, but it won't be able to succeed because that cat has not been added to our infrastructure yet. We can see here it's going to say, to check the sync state, come back and click, and it's going to say configuration template Catalyst 8000VR1 is scheduled to be attached when the device comes online. That's going to be what we want to do right now. We want to bring the device online, and we're going to use the advanced features of the newer operating system by moving it over to managed or controller mode. Now, the way we're going to do that is we want to get configuration on that device, but I don't want to necessarily go through the motion of logging into the unit, hitting the configuration, and entering things in. So one thing I want to point out here, first of all, is if I do a show version pipe include mode, we're going to see that this device is in autonomous mode. Now, what that means is it really doesn't know anything about orchestration and management with regard to SD-WAN. We want it to be part of our SD-WAN infrastructure, and in order to do that, we need to change it from autonomous mode to controller mode. Now, we're going to do that, but we're not going to do it just yet. The reason that I'm getting at this is that what I want to point out here is that we need to take some additional steps. The first step that I'm going to take is I'm going to go to devices. And what we're going to find is that one of my Cat 8000 Vs will actually have a keyword beside it that says it is vManaged. Now, obviously, we can look over here and we don't see that little green ribbon. We don't see the CSR designation. So that tells me that this has not been added to our infrastructure. Now, what I want to do is I want to remedy that. So to do that, I'm going to take the path of least resistance. I'm going to go over, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell the system that I want to generate a Bootstrap configuration. Now, to keep things simple, I'm going to say do not include the default root certificate. I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. And what this is going to do is it's going to generate a Bootstrap file. Now, this Bootstrap file, I'm actually going to save this locally on my device, and it's going to keep the name. Now, you'll notice that this is a .cfg file, and it actually corresponds to the UUID of the device in question. And remember, this happens because we don't have physical resources. We don't have cryptographic ASICs. In other words, we don't have TPMs. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and save this. I'm going to close. And what I want to do is I want to open up a second terminal session. Now, the first terminal session I have is going to my Cat 8000 V. Next, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here and I'm going to say File. And what I want to do is I want to open another tab. Now, I want that tab to be large, so I'm just going to amplify it just a little bit. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here and take a look at the directory. And there is that file that I just copied over. Now, if I say cat 8kv and do a tab complete, what you're going to see here is this is going to be the running configuration that I want to be assigned to my device. So this is the results of the template that we spent the time earlier creating. Now, what I want to do right now is I'm going to move this information over to my 8000V. So what I want to do is I want to get a copy of this, and I'm going to go back to my other terminal, and that's going to be the connection to the 8kV itself. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to transfer that file from the jump box to the 8kV, just like what we did with the CSR 1000 Vs. That's going to mean I'm going to type copy SCP boot flash. And what I want to do next is I'm actually going to enter the IP address of the jump box, which is going to be 100.100.100.254. My username is going to be user. And I want to look in the directory of home, user, downloads. Remember, it needs a capital D. And I'm going to paste in the name of that file. I'm going to hit enter. Now, remember what I mentioned previously. The CAT devices, the CSR devices, they need this .config file. If we were bringing up an ISR, what we'd do is we'd actually put this file on a thumb drive, and we'd insert that thumb drive, and then when the system comes up, the system would actually boot itself, but it can't have this name. Remember what it's got to be called? Cisco SDWAN _cloud _init.cfg. That's what the device in PNP mode is going to be looking for with regard to trying to find its configuration. Now, again, we're not using PNP, and since this is a Catalyst device, what's going to end up happening is it's going to be a Cisco device. It's not going to be geared for ZTP like the vEdges. This is just going to be another way of onboarding a device. Now, I want you guys to see as many possible combinations and permutations as possible. So the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to log in using the credentials for my jump box. And what should happen is it should actually download this file. Now, the other thing that I'm going to go ahead and download, just because I want to make certain that it's going to be here, is going to be my manual certificate, the one that we created in the lab. Remember that sd-wan.pim file. So here I want to say copy, scp, boot flash, and again, it's going to be the jump box, same user, but this time it's going to be home, user, downloads, and it's going to be sd-wan, all caps, .pem, lowercase, and we're going to place that file in my boot flash. Let's just do a directory. There is the sd-wan pim. There is the Cisco SDWAN _ cloud _ init.config file. Now, all I need to do at this point is change its mode. Remember, when I did a show version, pipe include mode, its mode was autonomous. Well, autonomous means it's CLI managed. I want it to be vManaged. And in order to be able to do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say controller mode enable, and I'm going to hit enter. I'm going to go ahead and confirm this. And what's going to end up happening is this box is actually going to reload. Now, since this is an SSH session, I'm going to lose connectivity to it. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to open up the console session. And what we're going to see is this box is actually going to reload. We should see the splash page here any moment where it's going to come up in the packages.conf mode. And this box is going to reboot itself. Once this is done, we should be able to see the results on our screen with regard to what happens. Now, this is going to take a little while. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk us through this from the perspective of what's going to be transpiring as this device reloads. During the reboot process, this device is actually going to change from the autonomous mode to the controller enable mode. Since it's in controller enable mode, it's actually going to activate the PNP boot process. The PNP boot process will actually read and look for that file, the file that we downloaded. Now, if that file's not there, obviously it's going to require manual configuration, or we could set the device up to actually communicate directly to the PNP server. But since we're in an on-prem deployment, I'm just taking this as my deployment method. Also, while this is coming up, I want to point out the fact that this is the device that we are bringing on board. This is the chassis number, and this little symbol with the cloud and the gear just indicates the fact that I created a Bootstrap configuration. Now, as this device comes up and begins to communicate, first, as we described, it will communicate with the vBond. If it is whitelisted, which is what this process is all about, it should receive all of the information it needs to join our SEN Fabric, communicate to the vManage, and bring itself online. As a result of that, that means that our certificate is going to require signature. Now, what we'll see is this is ultimately going to transition from this little symbol to a little green circle with the letter CSR in it, or certificate signature request. And then ultimately what's going to end up happening is if everything goes well, we're going to extract the contents of that file that we moved, the boot flash cloud _ init config file. The system should go through PNP process. Notice that it's pulling its information. We can see now that it is bringing up the tunnels as a result of self-signature. We should see that this actually transitions. And then here very shortly, what we should see is we should see a CSR icon appear here. Let's wait for it. Now we'll see that it's going to transition to CSR. That's the certificate signature request. As it transitions and as it comes online, this CSR indication in the graphical user environment is actually going to change to a little green ribbon. And the little green ribbon means it has been successfully onboarded into our fabric. Once that has transpired, I'll go ahead and do some command line verification commands just to illustrate the fact that this device has indeed come on board. We now see that we have the green ribbon. While I'm waiting for the system to stabilize a little bit, what I'm going to do is I want to go to the main dashboard. And from the perspective of the main dashboard, I want to see how this device is being represented. Right now, we can see that it is in the process of coming up ultimately the system is going to synchronize and we're going to see that all of our devices and resources are up. And if I take a look at those resources, what we should see here is I now have the Cat 8K R1 8000V virtual router up and operational in my SEN Fabric. But that's not good enough for me. I want to actually see it from the command line. So we're going to log in. If everything went well, it'll be admin. If I take a look at this and I say config space T, remember, that's not going to work anymore. Why? Because we're in controller mode. So the command, remember, is going to be config-transaction. Everything will work here. So that shows me that it's actually moved over. And also if I do a show version pipe include mode, we can see now that the device has transitioned from autonomous mode to controller mode, meaning it's going to obviously be vManaged. Now, the next part of this is going to be really interesting for me because I'm going to come in and say show SD-WAN control connections, plural, and I want to see if we have the connections that we've discussed thus far. I noticed that I have my vBond connection and I have connections to 2 vSmarts. So as a result of that, if I do a show SD-WAN OMP peers, we should see peerings with 2 vSmarts out of the 3 that we have. We notice based on what we see here that this is going to be vSmart 1 and this is vSmart 3. We see that we are learning prefixes. Information is being placed in our configuration tables. And if I come over and say show SD-WAN BFD sessions, let's see if we have any active IPsec sessions, and we do. And as a result of everything that we've done now, do a show run interface gigabit 1, and what we're going to see here is that NAT has been enabled on this interface, which was configured, remember, using our feature templates. We've assigned an IP address to this interface. What we're going to see is Gigabit Ethernet 2 has been placed inside of the service-side VRF or VPN 1. It's been assigned an IP address. And another thing that's also important, if I come in and say a show IP route for the global, we see our static default route, which is getting us to our gateway. But what if I say show IP route for VRF1? Notice we see that NAT DIA route that we've been talking about. This is that route that allows me to be able to leak information from the service-side VRF1 into the VPN 0 such that I can actually get information out of one VRF into another. And what this is going to do is this is going to change the rules with regard to what's happening on our host. So now if I were to hit refresh and see if I can get to enter1.com, we should actually be able to achieve reachability. Next, what I'm going to do is while that's happening, I'm going to go ahead and come in here and ping Google. We see that Google is working. If I take a look, obviously, at something like 8.8.8.8, everything is functional in this environment. And what we've seen is how we can creatively, systematically, and efficiently use templates in order to be able to expedite configuration, maintenance, and functionality for our endpoints in a very scalable fashion.